right, we're going to get started. Good morning. My name is John Matola. I'm the Vice Board of Finance annual public hearing session. I want to say a couple things. Our Lord won't be feeling well. Jim Walsh, member, unable to make as we watch the video. Certain make you can mail whenever you want. So today's meeting is the public session meeting, and what we do here every year is that this is your time to speak on the budget. You have 3 minutes. So what I would ask you to do is come up to the podium, state your name and address. You want them to write their name and address down? Okay. Oh yeah, I see it. See it over there. So write your name and address. This is for the minutes. We'll get started. 3 minutes for each speaker. After the public is done, I'm going to give the opportunity to board members to make a statement if they so choose. And that's the meeting. So, you know what we should do before I start is let's rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance too. Thank you. And then before we have our first speaker, one other thing I wanted to address, because we're getting some emails on it. I think belatedly we recognize that this is a holiday Easter weekend. Couple of things. When we voted on our schedule, I think it was last December, the board unanimously voted for this date. I just think the board, was an oversight on our part. So we apologize about that. But secondly, the charter does say we have to have this meeting in March. And, Easter weekend can be usually in April, sometimes is in late March. So, it was just an oversight on our part. So we apologize about that. But again, if you have any comments on the budget, please email us. Read your emails. We're going to be voting on the budget on Wednesday night. So with that, if you want to have your say in the budget, please step to the microphone and write your name and address down on the sheet of paper. Thank you.
Good morning. I'll write where I speak.
Yeah. Tell us for the record what your name and address
Lucille
is.
Bach, 325 Winnipeg Drive.
Morning.
Good morning. Everyone in this room has a budget, personal. Mine consists of my must, need, want. My musts are I have to have health. My needs are food, clothing, and shelter. I don't have to eat steak if salmon is on sale. I don't have to buy that pretty little outfit if I don't really need it. My wants, dinner out with friends, vacation with my family. I propose that the board consider running their budget based on musts, needs, and wants. Musts speak for themselves. The needs have to be balanced. And the wants, they need to be eliminated because people are suffering. I know that for some in Fairfield, a couple $100 is not a big deal. But for seniors like myself and friends that I know that are still working, that's a couple of trips. That's a couple of prescriptions. It makes a difference. I recognize that our increase may run below the rate of inflation, but it's still a pile-on. It doesn't make day-to-day living any easier. So I respectfully request that you consider pairing the needs and eliminating the want.
Thank you very much.
Morning. Jeff Peterson, 1 Barn Avenue. Finance. I want to start one thing. Last Thursday, DOE was formed by the this number was not a but based on the trend that this new data for 12.9 out of so I would ask the BOB budget increased by this. I think it's appropriate item. Also note that first, like Herbert would advocate as health of, and this is kind of I also don't think that asking for just line what is at the end of the day extremely responsible that we budget a lot of other come under extreme budget pressure. A couple of requests, West 0.8, Norwalk 0.2, Canaan 0.65. You guys know what stand. Now, some of that is funding as by COVID avoided. Some of that health FPS evaluated but decided on. In fact, that was correct. And as we've discussed in our meetings, our budget also comes in the face of unfunded hundreds of thousands of costs. Same our revenue year over year, $1.2 million. So I want to stress despite rising state, despite this annual revenue, deliver the budget increases teacher salaries, a long overdue staff, advances the transformation of elementary heating, advances the next sixth grade instruction, corporate safety enhancements, ASL program, a bunch of with reasonable budget requests and state. I want you to keep that in mind. I think this budget win for the children, win for the approach.
Thank you. You must have planned that out. Took you 2 minutes and 58 seconds. All right. Anybody else?
Hi, Katie Flynn, 204 Grandview Road. I am also a member of the Board of Education, but I'm speaking in capacity as resident and as a parent, and I want to advocate for this body to move forward the education budget, which I think is a responsible, reasonable budget, Board of Ed whole, fix our technical correct so that we can move on into that. I really have appreciated the Board of Finance's work. There are a lot of competing needs right now in the town. Take away the want. So I think look at this budget in totality, and I think Mr. Peterson said it much better than I can, but this is a reasonable budget. It was passed unanimously, and I think it needs.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning. David Krasnow, 155 First Street. I am also for the board, but I am a past public and as a parent, the Board of Ed budget, education budget, fairly lean. Try to keep it really tight. Because hopefully you will keep it whole and not only add that pen back into the budget. One thing to understand, we do not have a plan. Bodies do have. So if we are over budget, we now need to come back to and ask for more money. Prefer not.
Thank you. Any other speakers want to say something? If you want to, come on down and you can even start lining up.
people. Good morning. My name's Jennifer Damon. Drive Fairfield. I'm here on wanted to talk about budget. Went from out. They are, my opinion, under budgeted. For granted example, same amount of registered voters, and they're already receiving about $10,000 more with no benefits, but they're all also using the electronic knowing poll books, which are also a problem. I'm asking to have the board re-examine the whole budget. It says on the town's website that they still have a full-time administrative secretary, which is false because they moved her over to the one of the other departments because there's been RIF going back for 3 previous registrar of voters in the office. There's a serious problem there that needs to also be addressed. But I just want you to re-examine the budget. They're asking for an increase in salaries. It was put on the ballot that with the early voting, they're going to need more hours and more personnel. The office is understaffed. They don't have somebody there full time. With the way that workers are today, people call in sick at the drop of the hat. So how are they going to rely on filling that full-time office hours with part-time people that may or may not be reliable? So I'm just asking you to consider re-examining the budget as a whole and not approving it as the way it is now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, please step to the microphone.
Good morning. My name is John Wynn. I live on Harbor Road in Southport. Thank you for your service. I'd like to speak to you regarding the Board of Finance's role as fiscal stewards and checks and balances. A year ago, I stood at this podium and talked about concentration risk of banking assets. Finally, that's being addressed. Why it sat idle for a full year, I am unclear. I also talked about the problem of spending the earnings that we have on those assets and budgeting up to that level rather than returning that money to taxpayers or reducing the budget by the amount of interest earnings we have on those banking assets. It's the taxpayers' money. We shouldn't be spending up to that earned interest level because it develops bad habits from a spending standpoint. I noted in the first selectman's presentation, the grand list growth is troublesome, and that's an alarming trend, particularly when our spending habits continue to rise excessively. The potential of a real estate bubble bursting, even though our town's real estate prices are increasing, there are challenges and warning signs regarding potential corrections in that manner. What will that do to the grand list? What will that do to the amount of taxation revenue we can generate? Another item was the tax collector is going to look into going to collecting taxes twice a year in advance. So basically that will mean taxpayers are paying their money to the town is investing it, earning on it, rather than allowing the taxpayers to do that. That's a very foolish activity to do, particularly when we're exposing ourselves to that concentration risk. We might be solving that problem, but that's an issue. The reval, the firm that was selected last time, did a terrible job, in my opinion. You can look at the number of appeals that were filed at the last major reval in 2020, and that will indicate how well that firm did. They did a very poor job. That firm really should not be considered for the current upcoming reval. Final item is Board of Ed spending. I know members of this board advocated for an operational audit in the past. The metrics with Board of Ed spending is very alarming. We have enrollment declines. We have projections of declines. We have spending excessively increasing beyond cost of living levels, beyond the ability of taxpayers to fund it. At some point, something needs to be done. So I advocate for the administration and this board, the Board of Finance, to develop an operational audit plan for Board of Ed spending to evaluate ways they can cut that back. I will try and follow up in writing with some of these thoughts to better clarify it. Since I'm limited to 3 minutes, I wanted to trying to get the points out, but I'll follow up in writing on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen.
Good morning.
Morning.
Jen Jacobson, 40 Victoria Court, also a member and chair of the Board of Education. Thank you for being here this morning on this early, beautiful day. Appreciate your time and service. I'm here obviously to advocate for our town, for the town budget I think you have before us as a whole, but also to speak directly to the Board of Ed budget. As has been presented to you, originally our budget was at 5.5%, which was already one of the lowest in the state. The Board of Ed took it down to 5.39, and then after the Board of Selectmen made a technical correction on our health insurance rate, which was the right thing to do, we now sit at 4.78. Out of 16 Fairfield County districts, we sit in position 14 out of those 16, never mind, across the state. This is primarily due to districts struggling with the immense loss of revenue due to the federal funding ending at this point. Mr. Peterson already mentioned that amount to you. Fairfield was incredibly careful not to put recurring items into those funds. A lot of districts didn't have that luxury to be able to do that. We were good stewards with that money, but nevertheless, we are significantly down in the revenue. Couple that with millions of dollars that happen every year of increased state mandates, this budget represents less than 0.5% that is not contractually obligations or stamp mandates. And it is false to say we have declining enrollment. Our enrollment is up, as you well know, due to our increased elementary sections and projected to continue to do so going forward. You are in possession of the memo regarding our teachers' pension fund. This is new information, and as the first select person and as the Board of Selectmen made a technical correction of $1.279 million reduction to our budget was technically correct to do. That was the right thing to do, which took us to that 4.78. This pension information that comes from the town, not us, we normally get that before we vote, did not have it. It came months late. I don't know why that is. I would hope that you would investigate that so we can better understand so this doesn't happen in the future. However, we are $238,157 short for our teachers' pension. I would ask that you make the technical correction on that as well. We technically correct down, we should technically correct up. Regardless of the memo, these are our teachers. These are our educators who served our town, your families, my families. They paid into that. And our town benefits handsomely from that investment revenue off their work and service to our community. And to say, it should shake out for them, I would say that's a wrong message to send to our teachers. That is the wrong thing to do. It's technically wrong, but it is also morally wrong in my mind. So I ask that you do that. You make that correction. Do not make any further reductions on one of the lowest asks that is available in this state due to our fiscal responsibility and our superintendent coming in with a low budget. Again, that is my advocacy for you today, and I hope that you'll hear that that is the right thing for us to do. And again, I appreciate your time and happy to follow up or have a further conversation with any of you on this after today before you vote. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you. Anybody else want to say something on the budget? I don't see anyone stepping up to the microphone. You sure? People are here in the audience, a few. Okay. Well, thank you for your comments and presentations. I just want to take a few minutes to let our board members, if they so choose, say a few words on the budget, this year's budget process. And I'll start to my left with Mr. Castani. You can start first.
Thanks, John. If you don't mind, I'd prefer to go last. So whoever wants to go before me.
Well, I'll come back to you. How's that? Because I'm going to probably go last.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Ruggiero.
Hi, Lynn Ruggiero. Appreciate everyone coming today and sharing their feedback. I understand the points made on the Board of Ed budget and understand why those were, the adjustment was made and you're looking for that money back. And I think that's a reasonable request. I do have concerns with this budget. I think that the first selectmen's ask for a lot of new positions are alarming to me, and the rate of which they're adding and the salaries being requested are a little high. We need to look to make adjustments to get the tax number down. So as of right now, I'm not supporting the budget as it is, and I'm hoping that we find some offsets. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Penley, you want to say a few words?
Thanks, Shane Penley. Thanks for everybody for coming here. I was looking forward to hearing some public comments. So the few of you that came, I appreciate it. We've not gotten a ton of emails from the public. This is my first time going through a budget process as a member of the board, and on balance, my perspective is that the process has been what we would want. It's been thorough, it's been thoughtful, and although there are some issues where the board has debated, if you look at it from the big picture, there isn't a lot of disagreement. There has not been a lot of disagreement over material amounts of money. And I think that this is a responsible budget that that the first selectman put forth, particularly considering the contractual pay increases, the slow growth, the minimal growth of the grand list, and in consideration of the increase in the expenses in the budget compared to inflation. The last thing I'll say is that I'm definitely supportive of increasing the Board of Education's budget to reflect the necessary contribution to their pension fund, particularly since they didn't even have the information when they were putting together the budget. Thanks.
Mr. Stark?
I was hoping to be silent, but without our two most talkative members here, I felt like I kind of had to step up. So we got a bunch of emails, and that's a great way to interact with us in the future in between budget sessions if you want to. And generally, I'll channel them so that we can have them here and aired in public. Mostly complaining about 1.8% growth in taxes in a time of high inflation. And I was able to give one pretty important overall response. The growth in the tax rate is driven almost entirely by contractual salary increases that were negotiated under the prior administration. And that's not me blaming Brenda Kupchik's administration. That's that was the right thing to do. And I distilled this in a couple of slides, which are going to be a little hard to see from the cheap seats. But here's the first one. Town population is the orange line, which has grown by 2,500 persons in the years 20 to 22. We don't know how much the town has grown in 23 and 24, but given all the new housing stock we're adding, you can feel pretty sure that there's not going to be a lot of vacancies in those buildings, and the population is going to go up further. The blue line is the head count of the town side of the government, and it's mostly been on a downswing during the same period. That's not necessarily sustainable. Here's the other slide, and I didn't do nice big bold lines on this one, unfortunately, but the blue line is inflation from the period 2021 to 24. Started at 7%, dropped to 6.5%, then to 3.4, and now it's running at 3.2. The orange line is the national wage growth rate, which has been hovering at 5%, and inflation and wages go hand in hand. The bottom line, which is going to be almost impossible to see, is the mill rate increase. That's not sustainable either, right? Our firemen, police, teachers, they need to eat and feed their families. And as I showed you by the other chart, that's what's driving the increase. So I think while there are a few nice to haves in the budget, mostly it's most to haves, and we have to be realistic about it. Thanks.
You want to go, Mr. Curley?
Yeah, okay, that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Mottola. And thank you, Kevin, for that. I think those points are really valid, so I'm glad you made them. I wanted to just acknowledge that this budget process has been fairly bipartisan. We've had some pretty healthy discussions and debate in our meetings, and I want to thank my Board of Finance colleagues for a healthy discussion. I think all of our hearings that we've held and meetings that we've held where we've asked some probing questions, they were truly about the issues, and frankly, in a world that's full of politics, I like it better when it's more about governance. So I want to thank my colleagues for that. I also want to thank the First Selectman for the budget that he put together, and acknowledge that, I said this 4 years ago when the previous administration took over, and I'll say it again with respect to this administration. It's not easy stepping in late November and then within a couple of months having a budget of this magnitude with this level of detail. So I want to just commend the administration for that. So it's not just the First Selectman, it's the Board of Selectmen, it's the Finance Department, it's all of the department heads, it's the Board of Education as well. As was indicated, a good portion of this budget and the increases associated with the year-over-year comparisons are contractual. That doesn't mean that we just accept it, but we acknowledge it. And I certainly recognized when I received the Board of Education budget that absent those contractual increases, generally speaking, the budget was very lean. So I do appreciate the point that we all should look at things from a must-have, wants and needs being different, right? And so I appreciate that comment at the beginning of the session. Thank you for that. And I agree. Generally speaking, though, I think this town has been able to enjoy tax increases in the last several years because there's been a lot of deferred maintenance. There's been a lot of things that have been neglected. So I think to the extent that we now have a catch-up in the budget related to teachers' contracts being settled, related to the firefighters' contract being settled, and turning to the future, we now have a budget that reflects the impact of those increases, yet we're still seeing a proposed budget increase of less than 2%, which is the long-term run rate for inflation. Obviously, current inflation is above that, which is a double-edged sword, right? Because on the one hand, people in town and across the country are hurting, and we have to be sensitive to that. But that doesn't mean that the town itself isn't also feeling the pains of inflation. We're paying more for things just like everybody else. So to the extent that we can manage this budget in a way that allows us to keep the overall increase less than inflation, I think that's what we should always strive for. But we can't do it at the cost of deferring maintenance and putting things off, or cutting back on services, right? So I think overall, I think this was a very responsible budget as it was presented. I do agree that we need to try and manage this down if we can, and I think that comes in one of two forms. We're either going to look for ways to cut the budget in certain areas where we think it's appropriate, or we're going to find ways to increase revenue to the extent that that's available too. I think we've all compiled our own notes as to where those potential changes will be made. I expect that we'll have a handful. And I am hopeful that the net result of that, when this board meets later this week, will be a net positive for the taxpayer, and a further reduction. But we'll have a healthy discussion and debate. So I look forward to that. And most of all, I want to thank the public. I know we didn't have a huge turnout today. I think part of that is because, generally speaking, this hasn't been a controversial year. But I appreciate everyone coming. And as my colleagues mentioned, the emails all count too. So even if you're not here today, if you've sent emails, or if you will send emails in the next couple of days, we read them, we appreciate them, we take them all into consideration. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Mr. Testani?
Thanks, John. I'm Jack Testani. Want to also thank everyone for coming. I know Mr. Matola at the beginning of the meeting made reference to the fact that this meeting is being held on a holiday weekend. So to that extent, number one, I want to blame myself for having voted a number of months ago for this meeting to be held on this particular day. Having said that, I would like to first read a statement from Mr. Walsh and then make a similar comment. So Jim Walsh apologizes for not being available for today's meeting because he has always looked forward to hearing from the Fairfield taxpayers and residents. However, with today's meeting falling on Holy Saturday in his Catholic faith, he is unavailable to be here today. And speaking as a Catholic myself, I echo his comments, number one. Number two, again, to reference Mr. Matola's comments at the beginning, I am also to blame for not having voted, number one, to have this meeting on a different day. Number two, to not suggest that we hold it Thursday night last week, as an example, or Monday night. We could have certainly figured out a different day and time where perhaps more people would have been able to make it. Because I, along, I'm sure with the other board members, received several emails from people, and I'm just going to read one in particular. Quote, and your attempt to squeeze this through on a holiday weekend just shows all of the town residents how devious you are as first selectman. Not only is it a Christian holiday, but also a Jewish holiday, and the town schools are on holiday. This is outrageous and objectionable, unquote. So that should give you a flavor of some of the emails that we received, especially from residents concerned about when this meeting was held. Now, in terms of the budget itself, I've thought quite a bit about this, this entire process. And I, for one, want to speak for the silent majority. We had one person here, I believe, mention the seniors in this town and what they have to live on in terms of a limited income. So I, again, speaking for myself, I have no intention of voting for any increase to the mill rate, number one. Number two, I certainly think that more could have been done in terms of trying to figure out where positions would not be added. Starting on the town side, there's many new positions that, for those who have looked through the budget, may recall that new positions are being added. Number two, that there's more positions being added to the Board of Ed budget as well. So while I certainly understand that there's a $238,000 shortfall in the pension, how we make up for that, how we reconcile that with what is most likely going to be an increase, unfortunately, for town residents in terms of their taxes is one that we have yet to figure out. So having said all that, I just want to express my concerns for, again, the people who are on limited incomes in this town. They may not be here right now in person. They may not be speaking, but I'm convinced I and perhaps other members of this board weren't elected to increase taxes. So again, my concerns for how this budget is going to be reconciled with that is number one. Number two, I do think we have to remember that the previous administration came in with a Phil Pyle scandal, with an issue with Penfield that's all been addressed by this board in terms of the financial piece of it. There was maintenance that had been upkept. Certainly we added police, which is part of this budget, more so on the fire side, adding new personnel has been requested, along with different increases to capital outlay that, again, we'll all consider in the budget vote. So I want to thank you all for your time. Certainly want to thank you for remembering that this is a holiday weekend, and we all have given up our time as you have given up yours. And I'll just leave it with, I'm not going to vote for any increase to taxes for this town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Testani. And I'll finish up here. A couple of things. I just want to make it entirely clear for the public that this meeting was scheduled based on the Board of Finance's vote. It wasn't no one else, including the first selectman, didn't tell us to have the meeting on this date. As I indicated earlier, it was an oversight on the entire board. We voted on the schedule in December. So I just want to make that entirely clear. And once again, if public listening to this, if you were unable to make it to our meeting, please feel free to send us an email on your thoughts on the budget, because we certainly will read them. Just a couple of things on the budget. For me, the proposed budget is a 1.8% increase in the mill rate. And I know we're going to work on it as a board to try to get that number down. I think we should be able to do something. The mill rate in my career on the Board of Education, the Board of Finance, not the Board of Education, has increased just about every year. A few years it didn't. We had 0%. I remember right after COVID, if I recall. So it has gone up, and we strive to keep that as low as possible. I think the important thing for this proposed budget is that the spending increase that's part of the budget is right in line with past increases over the last 4 to 5 years. So I want to make that clear. And I think it was pointed out by members of the audience that one of the issues this year is the grand list growth was low this year, and it was substantially lower than past years, and that's affected the increase to the mill rate. So, or at least the proposed increase to the mill rate. We have to keep that in mind. And I don't know if we got an answer on this. Maybe this is some type of an analysis we need to look at. Why didn't the grand list grow as much as it has grown over the last few years? So that's something to consider. I think the budget is a good budget because, my opinion, based on what I've seen, it funds education. It also starts the process of funding those resources so the town works more efficient and works better. I got to tell you, people, I've lived here my whole life. We've run Fairfield like a small little New England town for way too long. We have 60,000 residents, but we've acted like, we're a New England town of 10,000 residents. And we need to stop doing that. I think our current first selectman has recognized that there are serious issues with respect to how we run the town. He's asking us to invest in certain resources, so in the long run, we have a better town, a more efficient town that will save taxpayers money. That's how I see this. And I'm going to support it. I'm going to support what the first selectman wants. I supported what the previous first selectwoman wanted in her first budget. I agreed that she needed a full-time chief of staff. I agreed she needed a full-time CAO, because I want to do what's in the best interest of the town of Fairfield. And I want to give any newly elected officer, first select person, the ability to succeed. And so I'm going to support. With that said, I want to make clear that we will tweak it. I think we can get it down a little bit. I really want to commend my fellow board members here. We've had long meetings. We kind of yelled at each other at times. I don't like that, but it's in good spirit, I think, because we all, I think, share the same concern that we want to do what's in the best interest of the town of Fairfield. So thanks to all of you. I'm going to leave it at that. We will be voting on Wednesday night. Again, public, if you have any concerns, emails, please send them. Okay? So with that said, I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. Mr. Testani. Seconded by Ms. Ruggiero. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and we'll see you Wednesday night. Thank you.